They said the marriage would never last, an aging cowboy with a past he wouldn't speak of, and a young bride who had never even been kissed. But what happened on their wedding night wasn't what anyone expected, and the secret they uncovered before dawn would change everything. If you're drawn to stories of love, mystery, and the kind of twists that leave you breathless, stay with me, and don't forget to subscribe, because this is only the beginning. The wind rolled low across the plains like it had something to say, whispering through the dry grass and rattling the old wooden fence that marked the edge of Caleb Turner's land. Folks around those parts said the land remembered things, every storm, every secret, every promise broken under the wide Texas sky, and if that was true, then Caleb's ranch had more stories buried in it than any man alive. Caleb himself was a man carved out of those same winds. 42 years old, broad-shouldered, quiet in a way that made people uneasy, he had the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Not because he was cruel, but because life had taken its share from him and never bothered to give it back. So when word spread through the small town that Caleb Turner was getting married, people didn't just gossip, they stared. And when they learned who he was marrying, the stares turned into something sharper. Her name was Emily Harper. 20 years old, soft-spoken, raised just a few miles east on a farm that had seen better days. She had eyes the color of early morning and a way of carrying herself that felt untouched. Not just innocent, but untouched by the kind of worldliness most people picked up without even realizing it. People talked. They always do. Some said she was desperate. Others said Caleb was lonely. A few whispered things uglier than either of those. But the truth was simpler, and far more complicated. Neither of them knew what they were doing. The wedding itself was small. A handful of folding chairs set up outside the old chapel, white paint peeling at the edges, a crooked cross leaning slightly to the left like it had grown tired of standing straight. The sky that day stretched wide and blue, with just enough cloud to soften the heat. Emily wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, nothing extravagant, but the way she held the bouquet in her trembling hands told its own story. She wasn't afraid of Caleb. Not exactly. She was afraid of everything else. Of stepping into a life she didn't understand. Of becoming someone she didn't yet know how to be. Caleb stood at the front, hat in his hands, shifting his weight like a man who'd faced down storms and stampedes but found himself undone by something as quiet as this moment. When Emily walked toward him, step by careful step, he didn't look at the crowd. He only looked at her. And for a second, just a second, something softened in his expression. Something human. The vows were short. Neither of them was good with words, and the preacher knew better than to stretch things longer than they needed to be. When Caleb said, "I do," his voice came out rough, like it hadn't been used in a while. When Emily said it, hers was barely above a whisper, but it didn't waver. That mattered. It mattered more than anyone there realized. Because that whisper carried a kind of courage no one had bothered to see. By the time the sun dipped lower and the last of the guests drifted away, the air had changed. Weddings do that, they shift something invisible, something you can't quite name. And then it was just the two of them. Husband and wife. Standing on the edge of something neither of them understood. The ride back to Caleb's ranch was quiet. The truck hummed along the dirt road, kicking up dust that hung in the air behind them like a fading memory. Emily kept her hands folded in her lap, her fingers twisting together now and then before she caught herself. Caleb noticed. He noticed everything. But he didn't say much. Didn't know how to. The truth was, he hadn't planned this far. Marriage had been an idea, something practical, something that made sense in a world where loneliness had started to feel heavier than work. Emily needed stability. Caleb needed something he couldn't quite name. But now that it was real, sitting beside him in a white dress with the sun catching in her hair, he realized something that unsettled him more than any storm ever had. He didn't know how to be a husband. And Emily didn't know how to be a wife. The ranch house came into view as the sun slipped lower, painting everything in gold. It wasn't much. Weathered wood. A porch that creaked under the slightest weight. Windows that had seen too many seasons. But it was his. And now, it was hers too. Caleb cut the engine. The sudden silence felt louder than the drive had been. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Emily spoke. "So, this is home." Her voice was soft, but there was something steady beneath it. Not confidence exactly, but a willingness to try. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, He cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how inadequate that sounded. It ain't fancy. But it's solid. Emily looked at the house for a long moment, then gave a small nod. I like it. She didn't say it to be polite. That surprised him. Inside, the house carried the faint scent of wood and dust, mixed with something warmer, something that hinted at the life Caleb had lived there alone. A pair of boots by the door. A worn chair near the window. A table that had seen more quiet meals than shared ones. Emily stepped in carefully, like she didn't want to disturb anything. Or maybe like she didn't yet believe she belonged. Caleb set his hat down and ran a hand through his hair, suddenly unsure of what came next. The ceremony was done. The guests were gone. There was only one thing left. And neither of them knew how to face it. The night settled in slowly, wrapping the ranch in a quiet that felt almost deliberate. The kind of quiet that made every small sound seem louder, the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of fabric, the faint sigh of the wind outside. Emily stood near the edge of the bedroom doorway, her hands clasped together. Caleb lingered a few steps behind her. This was it. The moment people joked about. The moment people assumed. The moment that was supposed to come naturally. Except it didn't. Not for them. Emily turned slightly, glancing at him over her shoulder. There was no fear in her eyes, but there was uncertainty. A question neither of them knew how to ask. Caleb let out a slow breath. We don't have to rush anything. The words felt awkward, heavy, but honest. Emily studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'm glad you said that. A small pause. Then, quietly, because I don't know what I'm doing. Caleb huffed out a faint, unexpected laugh. Yeah, me neither. And just like that, something shifted. Not into passion, not into certainty, but into something quieter, something real. They didn't rush into anything that night. They talked. At first, it was small things. The weather, the land, the kind of food they liked. But slowly, carefully, those small things turned into bigger ones. Emily spoke about her childhood, about growing up in a house where love wasn't loud but was always present. Caleb spoke less, but when he did, it mattered. Pieces of his past slipped through, enough to hint at wounds he hadn't let anyone see in years. Hours passed without either of them noticing. And when the silence finally returned, it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was shared. They fell asleep on opposite sides of the bed, not touching, but not distant either. Somewhere in between strangers and something more. And sometime in the middle of the night, something happened. A sound, faint, out near the barn. Caleb's eyes snapped open instantly. Years of instinct didn't fade just because he'd gotten married. He sat up slowly, listening. There it was again. Not the wind. Not an animal he recognized. Something wrong. Emily stirred beside him. Caleb. His voice dropped low. Stay here. But she was already sitting up. I'm not staying alone if something's out there. He hesitated, then nodded. Together, they stepped out into the night, the air cool against their skin, the darkness stretching wide and endless around them. The barn stood about 50 yards away, its silhouette cutting into the starlit sky. And as they got closer, they saw it. The door was open. Caleb stopped cold. Because he knew, without a doubt. He had locked it. Emily's fingers brushed lightly against his arm. Did you leave it like that? He shook his head slowly. No. And that's when they heard it. A voice. From inside. Low. Unfamiliar. And whispering something neither of them could quite understand. Caleb stepped forward, every instinct sharpening. Whatever waited inside that barn. It wasn't just going to change their night. It was going to change everything.